Hello, I'm Kerry Gorgone, and this is Appfire Presents, the best project portfolio management show by Appfire. Today, we're going to address the question, how do I work with difficult stakeholders? And to help us with that is Michelle Bartonico, Senior Strategist and Project Manager at Trinity University. She's a certified project management professional, completed the Google Project Management Program, and the search engine optimization specialization from UC Davis Continuing and Professional Education. So she is the perfect person to help us answer that question. Stick around for 10 minutes of really good, valuable insight.
Appfire Presents, the best project portfolio management show by Appfire.
Michelle, help. How do I work with difficult stakeholders? Not that anybody on my team is difficult. I'm asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend. Oh, gosh. So I did prepare some notes for this, but I'm going to go a little bit off script because that's what difficult stakeholders do anyway. But here's what I would suggest when you're dealing with a difficult stakeholder. What does that even mean? For one person, a difficult stakeholder is like, I've seen that type of person before. I know exactly how to handle them. They're actually not that difficult. For somebody else, they might say, I've never encountered this type of personality before, style of communication, style of working on a project team. I'm completely lost. They are infinitely difficult for me. So one of the ways you work with difficult stakeholders and actually succeed on the other side is by trying to do as many projects as you can with different types of people.
So you're saying punish yourself.
Punish yourself
go right
first.
In there.
Punish yourself first. See what you can get under your belt. See if you can have anchor memories to say, I remember when this happened, and here's what I did, or here's what I shouldn't have done. I had something just the other day that I should have been a little bit more concrete and sought more clarification, and I backed off a little bit because I thought, well, the person is much higher than I am in the org chart. I trust them. There's no reason to not trust them. Let's just move forward. I'll let it go. It'll breeze over. And it kind of bit me in the butt. So that's something that, again, I know on paper what I'm supposed to do, but sometimes it's just really hard given the situational context to figure out what battle do you want to pick.
Let's talk about what flavors of difficult stakeholders are there, like what different types.
So if you're subscribing to a project management technical definitions, you can look at different models like the salience model, for example, and people are going to be categorized as dominant or dormant and other categories like that. But for us, people who just want to manage projects, they're not project managers. They just want to manage a project to completion. I like to approach it in sort of a lighthearted way because I think it just helps you get through the day. So I've sort of created these personas of people that I think, again, for my experience, these are the types of people who I've experienced. You might have different ones, but
you didn't name them after people, though.
No, I definitely didn't name them after people because that's the thing. That's why you have to get as much experience as you can, because it's not one person who does something that's so unique. It's a type of person. So, for example, I have a group of people who I call the astronaut. And these are people who I think are difficult because they kind of orbit way above the clouds and they're not really into the details when they kind of need to be. And then they crash land onto Earth and you don't really know where they're going to land, but you know you have to go get them. And so that can cause a lot of damage. That can cause a lot of ripple effect to your project because they're unpredictable. You don't know when they're going to actually crash land onto Earth. And so those are the types of things I mean when I say kind of in a lighthearted way, just categorize people and know what that means to you. And with any of these difficult stakeholders, always try to approach it with empathy first. It's going to be really difficult, and it is still difficult for me too. But try to at least ask yourself, why are they operating like this? Are they distracted? Do they just trust you? And it's actually a compliment. And they think, you know what, I can just orbit above Earth because you are highly competent. I don't need to get into the weeds. I trust you're going to move things forward. So in some ways, maybe if you take a pause and you think about it, maybe it's a compliment. Maybe they have a professional barrier. Maybe they are deficient in technology or something. And so they're uncomfortable participating with the rest of the project team. So just taking a step back and trying to be empathetic and try to understand why a person might be what you think is difficult is helpful.
That can be
and then
hard
you
though,
can think about how to
Michelle.
approach that.
So, like, if you're at the very end and you're about to turn everything in, there's one kind of stakeholder that has not been participating that pops up right at that time and has some thoughts. So how do you deal with that? How do you be empathetic when you have like 45 minutes left in your project window?
So a friend of mine calls that the zombie stakeholder, the stakeholder who's been dead the entire project, and you've like sent them 100 emails, and then at the very end they just like pop out from the dead. And how do you deal with that empathetically? So I would say same way, take a breath, and then articulate as clearly as possible objective information. So for example, hey, thank you for approaching me. I'm excited that you're wanting to engage in this portion of the project. Unfortunately, we're at this stage, and I want to just friendly remind you that, you know, these 4 emails or these 4 junctures or meetings or whatever factual pieces you have. We had these meetings, we had these milestone retrospectives, we had a charter, we had timeline updates, whatever those things are that you've been continuing with for your project, you need to reference those. So key number 1 is, if you're managing a project, try to be as over communicative as possible. And as much as you can be, those are the things that you can go back to objectively and say, I'm so sorry. I know you were incredibly busy. It looks like you may have missed this.
All 17 meetings.
You may have missed some of the emails about where we were in this process. And I'm so sorry that we're at this place, but let me take down your notes so that if we repeat this project, I have them for the future. Or let me take down your notes so that we can figure out how we can mitigate this in the future. So again, trying to make sure that they feel heard. Again, they may be mad about it. They may be mad. They may say, you know what? I want to actually pull some of this back. You're not turning this in yet. It's not done. So in that scenario,
You're dealing with a couple of things, right, Michelle, at that point, because it's not necessarily the schedule you selected. It's the schedule you had to adhere to for one reason or another. So I guess, does it depend who's this is that's pulling it back? Because if it's like,
yes, it does.
Their schedule, then you're like, okay, whatever you say. But if it's not their schedule, then what do you do?
Exactly. So up front, some of the different artifacts that you would produce is a stakeholder register, and a stakeholder register would help you keep track of who those people are. And again, from a technical standpoint, what kind of person you think they are. And then there's the lighthearted stuff later on, right? When you figure out that they're a blue sky astronaut. But knowing who they are, and again, the RACI chart, responsibility matrix, that answers your question. I hear
What's
you,
RACI
but how
for?
much responsible, accountable, consult, and inform. So of the people who are part of the project team, if that zombie stakeholder is somebody who you just needed to be informed, that's where you say, I hear you. I understand your frustration. I want to make sure that you know that you were part of the communication and informed in this way. I'll make note of your concerns, or I appreciate you being engaged at this point, but we have to move forward. So always, I hear you. But if they are somebody who is responsible, certainly accountable, I mean, that's your sponsor at that point. But if they're accountable, then yeah, you got to stop and you got to figure out what happened there. And depending on how urgent the actual timeline is, you might have to say, okay, we made a mistake somewhere. We're going to diagnose it afterward in a retrospective. Or, okay, we're actually going to pull this back. We can afford to lose some time and then figure out what happened and how to incorporate your feedback, how to make you feel comfortable before we turn in our report or before we launch a product, or et cetera. But hopefully your most important stakeholders, your most important and influential stakeholders, those are not going to be your zombie stakeholders, hopefully. If they are, then yes, make sure to do some upfront work. If you can start to sense that the key people are not engaging with you early, try to figure out, how do you get in front of them? Is it their admin assistant? Is it a friend of theirs who you can ask for advice? Do you bring food to meetings? I mean, stuff like that. Like, how can you get them to engage in a way that allows them to participate so that when they get a meeting recap, they know what you're talking about?
I used to use subject lines. I would have people who that would be zombies, except I'd say, I swear to God, this will take 5 seconds. Open it and just tell me yes or no. And then they would tell me along the way, so I didn't have those last
Yeah,
minutes.
that's definitely something that for those people who are also very distracted, they're busy, they're pulled in different directions, subject lines are great. Review by, review needed, approval needed. Be as explicit and don't use clickbait. Just ask them what you need an answer on, and try to make it as convenient for them as possible. And again, those are the people who you absolutely need to make sure they're engaged with your project.
Michelle, thank you so much. You should write a book about this stuff. When you do, we'll promote the heck out of it. In the meantime, if you want to see more episodes of the Best Project Portfolio Management Show, some of which feature Michelle Bartonico, you can find them at hub.appfire.com. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
I thank you.